When you grow up in an orphanage, you learn two things pretty quickly. First, that you don't get to choose your family, and second, that you're responsible for your own survival. I remember being 6 years old, sitting on the edge of a bed in that sterile, white-walled room, staring out the window. The other kids had parents who would come visit, take them out on weekends, promise them they'd be home soon. Me? I didn't even know my real name for a while. It was just Hugh, the kid who kept to himself, who didn't have anyone to lean on. I used to dream about being picked by a family. Any family. I used to imagine a father who'd tell me I was worth something. A mother who'd hold me when I was scared. It was always the same dream, over and over. But I never got picked. And as I got older, I realized that wasn't going to happen. The only person I could rely on was me. When I turned 18, I left that place behind. No more foster homes. No more awkward family dinners with strangers who didn't care. But the world outside the orphanage wasn't kind. I didn't have a degree, no connections, nothing to help me get started. So I worked. And I worked. 3 jobs just to make rent, just to eat, just to stay afloat. I worked at a diner in the mornings, a warehouse at night, and on weekends I'd clean offices for a little extra cash. I was exhausted. But I was determined. I wasn't going back to that life, and I sure as hell wasn't going to spend it as a nobody. Somewhere in between the sleepless nights, I came up with an idea for a business. It was risky, almost reckless, but I couldn't shake the feeling that if I didn't go for it, I'd be stuck in the same cycle forever. I put all my savings into a small, failing company. People said I was crazy, that I was throwing my money away. But I didn't care. I had nothing to lose. It was hard. I almost lost it all. There were nights I couldn't pay the bills, nights I couldn't keep the lights on. But slowly, something started to click. The business grew. It wasn't overnight, but it grew. Eventually, I was able to hire people, build a real team. And I kept going. I kept pushing until one day, I realized I wasn't scraping by anymore. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. My business took off, and suddenly, I was making more money than I ever dreamed possible. By the time I met Stacy, I was a different man. I had a house, I had security, and I had the kind of life I always wanted. A life that felt real, that felt like it had meaning. I was no longer that kid in the orphanage, waiting to be picked up. I had a future, and I wanted to share that future with someone. Stacy and I hit it off right away. She was smart, funny, and, let's be honest, gorgeous. She was everything I thought I wanted. She seemed to like the life I had built, too. We got married quickly, and I was happier than I'd ever been. I thought that was it. This was the dream I had always wanted. I knew I was lucky. I knew it didn't come easy. But, for the first time in my life, I felt like maybe I had something real. And when we started talking about having kids, I was all in. I had dreamed of this. I dreamed of being a father to a child who could grow up safe, loved, with opportunities one never had. I wanted to be the father I never had. But dreams don't always turn out the way we expect, do they? Stacy's pregnancy was a blur of excitement, anticipation, and, I'll admit, a little bit of fear. I wasn't exactly the most fatherly figure in the beginning. I mean, I had no idea what I was doing. But this was something I wanted, something I had spent my entire life dreaming about. Having a family, being a dad. I thought that if I could build a life from nothing, I could handle fatherhood too. I'd seen how things could go wrong, how families could fall apart. But I was determined not to make those same mistakes. Stacy was thrilled when she found out she was pregnant. She had always talked about wanting kids, and this was going to be the moment where everything came full circle. She'd be the mother I never had, and I'd be the dad I always wished for. We'd create the kind of life that was stable, secure, something that would protect our child from the chaos I'd known growing up. That was the dream, anyway. Her pregnancy was smooth. We went to all the appointments. I was there for every ultrasound, every test. Stacy glowed. She loved the attention, and I loved seeing her like that. We picked out baby clothes, decorated the nursery, even started talking about names. I was so damn proud of her. Proud of us. When the time finally came, it was a long, grueling process. But when Oliver was born, I remember feeling like I had won the lottery. This tiny, perfect little boy who was supposed to be ours. I was in the room when he came into the world, and I saw the first breath he took. He looked like a mix of both of us. Stacy's eyes, my nose. I swear, I felt like I was looking at the future. But, as I held him for the first time, something didn't feel right. I couldn't put my finger on it at first. The skin tone. It wasn't just a little off. It was striking. Oliver's skin was dark, and not just a little darker than mine or Stacy's, but noticeably so. I thought maybe I was just tired or overthinking it. But the more I looked at him, the more I wondered. At first, Stacy just brushed it off. She said it was one of those things that just happens. That sometimes kids take after distant relatives you don't even know about. She was calm, reassuring, even though I could tell something in her eyes was a little too careful, like she was trying too hard to make me believe it. But I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that this was just some freak coincidence, some weird quirk of genetics. But the feeling in my gut didn't go away. It was this gnawing sense that something wasn't adding up. I started paying closer attention to Stacy's behavior, how she acted around Oliver. She was still the same doting mother, of course, but there were these little things. The way she would get defensive when I asked about family history, or how she never wanted to talk about the night of the conception. When I asked her if she thought he looked like me, she just laughed it off, saying, "He's all yours, babe." But the more I thought about it, the more the cracks started showing. One night, after a long day of work, I found myself staring at Oliver while he slept in his crib. The way his little chest rose and fell. I couldn't help it. I thought back to my own childhood, to the days I spent in that orphanage, always wondering why no one wanted me, always wondering what it would feel like to belong. I had promised myself that when I became a father, I would make sure my kids would always feel like they belonged. They would never question who they were. They would never wonder where they came from, like I did. But now, there was this overwhelming sense of doubt. It wasn't just about Oliver's appearance. It was about everything. The way Stacy had reacted to my concerns. The way she had seemed so adamant that everything was normal when it clearly wasn't. There was something off, something I couldn't ignore. So, I made a decision. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I had to know the truth. I ordered a DNA test. Stacy didn't know about it. She never even suspected. I had to know for sure, because the idea of being a father to someone else's child, someone who might not even want to be with me, it was something I couldn't stomach. The waiting felt like torture. I wanted to believe Stacy. I wanted to believe that everything was fine. But I couldn't ignore the gut feeling. I had to know. And when the results came back, well, I wish I could say I was prepared. I wasn't. I wasn't even close. The moment the DNA test results hit my inbox, I felt like the world stopped. It wasn't a slow build-up of tension or a gradual realization. No, it hit me like a freight train, cold and sudden. I had already suspected something, but seeing those words, those cold, undeniable facts on the screen, it shattered me. Oliver wasn't my son. And I can't even begin to explain what that felt like. It wasn't just the betrayal of Stacy's affair. It was the betrayal of everything I had believed in, everything I had built. The life I thought I had, the family I had dreamed of, the future I'd imagined, it all felt like a lie. I remember sitting there, staring at the test results in disbelief, my heart racing, my hands shaking. I could hear the faint sounds of Stacy in the other room, talking to Oliver, cooing at him, like everything was perfectly normal. She had no idea, but I felt this awful, gnawing feeling, knowing that the one thing I had trusted, the one person I had trusted to be honest with me, had lied, had deceived me. I should have confronted her right then and there. But I couldn't. I couldn't just break her down, even though every fiber of my being screamed to do so. I wasn't sure what would happen next. What was I even supposed to say? How could I confront her about this without losing everything I had? I sat there for hours, trying to make sense of it all. Trying to make sense of her. Stacy had been my rock, the one thing I thought I could trust, the one person I thought would always be in my corner. But now, I felt like a fool. All those nights I spent holding Oliver, telling him how much I loved him, promising him a better future than the one I had, felt like a joke. He wasn't even mine. I thought back to my own childhood in the orphanage, how I used to wonder if I would ever be loved, if I would ever have a family who cared about me. And here I was, just a few steps away from losing the family I thought I had finally built. How was I supposed to deal with this? How was I supposed to face Stacy, knowing that she had made this decision, knowing that she had betrayed me not just with someone else, but with our son's paternity? I had a million questions running through my mind, but the only thing that was clear was that I couldn't stay in this relationship anymore. I couldn't live a lie. Not for me, and not for Oliver. The worst part? I realized how much I actually cared about the kid. I loved him like he was my own, and that thought made everything so much harder. I had wanted to be a father my whole life. And now, I was faced with the harsh truth that I'd been playing a role I didn't even know I was in. But there was another part of me, a part that had fought to build a life from nothing, that knew what had to be done. I had the means. I had the resources. I had everything that Stacy didn't, and everything that Oliver needed. And that's when the idea hit me. If Oliver wasn't my biological son, that didn't matter. What mattered was the love I had for him, the care I could give him. And I would not let Stacy raise him, not after what she had done. I decided to take action. I was going to fight for Oliver. Not because he was mine by blood, but because he was mine in every other way that mattered. He deserved a better life than what Stacy could give him. A life where he would always know the truth, where he would always be cared for and loved, not just because he was a baby to be shown off, but because he was a child who deserved a future. The thought of leaving Stacy, of losing everything, hurt more than I could even describe. But I knew deep down that I couldn't let my loyalty to her keep me from doing what was best for Oliver, and I would fight with everything I had to make sure he grew up in a home that valued him for who he truly was, not for the lie he had been brought into. So, I started making plans. I contacted a lawyer. Quietly. I didn't know how I would explain all of this to Stacy, or if she would even try to fight me for Oliver. But I knew one thing for sure. I would do whatever it took to make sure he was mine. I thought I had everything figured out. I had the means, the resources, the love for Oliver. It felt like a no-brainer. I was going to fight for him, and I was going to win. What kind of mother could Stacy be, after everything I had learned? She had lied to me, betrayed me in ways that I couldn't even process. She didn't deserve to have him. He deserved better. He deserved me. I hired the best lawyer I could afford. I gathered evidence, filed motions, and spent hours preparing. I had a plan, a strategy to make sure Oliver ended up in a safe, stable home. A home where he wouldn't be treated like some accessory, a pawn in someone else's game. But nothing prepared me for how the court battle would unfold. Stacy, she wasn't the same person anymore. She was cold, calculating. She turned on the charm, spun the story in her favor, and presented herself as the devoted mother who only wanted what was best for Oliver. She cried on the stand. She played the role of the wounded woman who had been betrayed, who had made mistakes, but was still a good mother. She even had her own lawyer playing up the fact that I was too hard-nosed or emotionally distant to raise a child properly. And I was left trying to defend the truth. That Oliver wasn't my biological child, but I was his father in every other sense of the word. I tried to explain how much I loved him, how I had been there since the moment he was born, how I'd always provided for him, always supported him. But the judge didn't care. What mattered was the legal bond, and according to the court, I didn't have one. Stacy, despite everything, was still legally his mother, and that was enough for the system. The decision came down like a hammer, and I felt the weight of it in my chest. Oliver was going to stay with Stacy. I couldn't do anything about it. I lost. I remember walking out of that courtroom, the empty echo of my shoes on the tile floor, and thinking about how the system had failed. How it didn't matter how much I cared, how much I loved this kid, it was all about legal technicalities. Stacy didn't look back as we left, like she had won something. She had. In a sense, she had. But I had a pit in my stomach. It was like the world had tilted on its axis, and I was left trying to find my balance. I thought about Oliver. I couldn't imagine him growing up with Stacy, the woman who had so easily tossed him into this mess of lies and half-truths. But there was nothing I could do about it now. At least, nothing legally. After the court decision, I felt like a part of me just died. I had put everything I had into trying to keep Oliver, into protecting him from the chaos that was already surrounding him. But Stacy Stacy just moved on, like it was nothing. It wasn't like she cared all that much about losing the kid, at least not the way I cared. No, she started focusing on herself again, like she was some free spirit who had just been let out of jail. She threw herself into partying, drinking, clubbing, doing everything she hadn't done while she was pretending to be a good wife and mom. I started hearing rumors, people I used to know, people from the old circle, telling me that Stacy was out at bars and clubs, living it up. No responsibilities. No commitments. It was like she was making up for all the time she spent being the perfect wife. It didn't take long before she was showing up at her mom's house, dropping Oliver off like he was some burden she just couldn't deal with. She'd say she was going to work, but everyone knew she wasn't. Work. She hadn't worked in months. She was spending her days out with her friends, hitting every club in the city, drowning her problems in whiskey shots and whatever else she could find. And when she wasn't out doing that, Oliver was passed off to her mom, who had her hands full already with her own life. Stacy's mom was older, frail even, and didn't have the energy to care for a child, let alone the emotional maturity to raise one. But Stacy didn't care. She would just leave him there, without even a second thought. Sometimes I would see Stacy's friends post pictures on social media, and I'd see her laughing, dancing, arms around strangers, with a drink in her hand, completely unbothered. The whole thing made me sick. I had tried so hard to give Oliver a good life, and now Stacy was out there acting like she was a teenager again. At least I could take comfort in knowing that Oliver was with his grandmother, someone who at least had a heart. But I still couldn't shake the feeling of everything falling apart. I had wanted to be there for him, to raise him the right way, to show him what love really meant. But instead, he was stuck with a mother who had already checked out, who had moved on from the mess she had created. I tried reaching out to Stacy, asking her to get her act together. I told her she was ruining everything for Oliver, that she was being selfish. She told me to mind my own business, that she was still his mother, and that I had no right to tell her how to raise him. The truth is, it was getting harder and harder to even recognize the woman I married. She was slipping further and further away from the person I thought she was, the person I trusted with everything. And now, Oliver was the one who would have to pay for it. I knew I had to be there for him, no matter what, even if Stacy wasn't. But it was hard, so damn hard, watching Oliver grow up in that environment. I wanted to take him back. I wanted to just scoop him up and tell him everything would be okay. But every time I tried, I got met with walls. Stacy was still his legal guardian, and even though I had more than enough to provide for him, she wasn't going to let me have him without a fight. I wanted to believe this was all a phase, that Stacy would eventually get her act together and take responsibility. But deep down, I knew the truth. She was never going to change. She was always going to put herself first, and Oliver was always going to come second. And the worst part? I still loved her, in some twisted, messed up way. I still wanted to believe that the woman I had married was somewhere deep down inside her. But that was a fantasy, and it was time I stopped holding on to it. When I was a kid, I didn't have anyone. I was alone. I spent my childhood in that godforsaken orphanage, bouncing from one foster home to the next, never really feeling like I belonged anywhere. I used to lie awake at night, wondering what it would feel like to have a family. A real family. Not just people who fed me and gave me a bed, but people who loved me, who wanted me around, who would choose me every day. It was a fantasy, of course. One I dreamed about more than I should have. I remember when I first thought about having a family of my own. The idea came to me when I was about 14 or 15, somewhere between feeling sorry for myself and deciding I was done being a victim. I thought, one day, I'll have kids of my own, and I'll make sure they never feel the way I felt. I'll give them everything I never had. I used to dream about adopting a kid, someone who had nobody, just like me. Someone who needed the love I never got. I'd be the dad they could count on. I'd be the parent I never had, the one who didn't bail when things got tough. So when I met Stacy, and we talked about having a family, I thought I was living that dream. But nothing prepared me for how twisted things would get. After I lost the court battle for Oliver, I was angry. I was hurt. But more than anything, I was determined. I wasn't going to let my son grow up in a life where his mother was more interested in partying than in being a parent. Stacy was selfish. She always had been, but this was different. This was about saving Oliver. He deserved better, and I wasn't going to let him down. It took some time, but I started to see cracks in Stacy's perfect facade. Stacy's friends were the first ones to give me the truth. After the divorce, some of them reached out to me. They were tired of covering for her, tired of pretending that she was some innocent victim. They'd seen her behavior firsthand. They knew what she was doing when she dropped Oliver off with her mom, claiming to be at work while she was out drinking, clubbing, partying until dawn. They were sick of being caught up in her lies, and they were tired of pretending she wasn't a hypocrite. I didn't trust them at first. They'd been covering for her for years, turning a blind eye to her actions. But they were done. One of them even told me, "She's a mess, Hugh. We've all been trying to warn you, but she's never going to change. She's only in it for herself." I recorded the conversation. I didn't know how much of it would hold up in court, but I needed to gather anything I could. I knew I had to build a case, one that would force the court to see Stacy for who she really was, an irresponsible mother who couldn't be trusted. The truth had to come out, and if I had to drag it kicking and screaming into the light, I would. But I didn't stop there. Stacy wasn't just going to hand Oliver over, and I knew that. She was sneaky. She wasn't going to let anyone see what she was really up to. So, I followed her. I did it quietly, covertly. I'd drive around, park a block away, watch as she went out with her friends. I even started taking pictures of her stumbling out of clubs, drunk, and not caring that her kid was at home, alone, with her mom. It made me sick, honestly, but it was what I had to do. I started building the case, piece by piece. Photos, recordings, and witness statements from her friends who were willing to talk. People who had seen enough to know Stacy wasn't fit to be a parent. It wasn't pretty, and it wasn't easy. I knew I had to go through a long trial. But this wasn't just about winning a legal battle. This was about saving Oliver's life. He deserved better than to grow up in a house where his mother couldn't even take care of herself. The trial was brutal. Stacy fought tooth and nail, trying to paint herself as the good mother, the victim in all this. She cried. She played the "I'm the one who suffered" card. She even tried to turn the tables on me, claiming I was trying to take Oliver from her out of spite. But as the trial went on, the evidence mounted. Her own friends spoke up. My lawyer was relentless. They all painted the same picture. Stacy was a negligent, selfish mother who wasn't doing anything but dragging Oliver into her mess. In the end, it wasn't even close. The court found in my favor. The judge ruled that Stacy's parental rights should be terminated. I remember sitting there in that courtroom, my heart racing, hearing those words. Parental rights terminated. It felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders, but at the same time, it was bittersweet. I had won, but I didn't feel victorious. I just felt like I had done the right thing. I had saved my son. Stacy was furious. She screamed, she cried, she tried to lash out at me, but it didn't matter anymore. Oliver was with me now. The next chapter of my life started that day. And honestly, I don't know if it was even possible to feel relief after everything I had been through. All I knew was that Oliver was going to be okay now. He was safe. He was going to grow up in a home where he would be loved and cared for, not ignored or neglected. It took everything I had, every ounce of willpower, every shred of belief that I could fix this, to get to this point. But I had done it. And, for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was finally making the right choices. Not just for me, but for Oliver. After the court ruled in my favor, I felt a mix of emotions, relief, pride, even triumph. But mostly, I felt the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. I had fought for Oliver, and I had won. But the real battle was just beginning. I wasn't just taking him out of a bad situation. I was taking on the challenge of rebuilding his life from the ground up. He was only 5 years old at the time, and even though he didn't have the words to say it, I could see the pain and confusion in his eyes. He had been through so much already, and it was my job to make sure that he didn't carry that weight any longer. At first, it was hard for both of us. Oliver had lived in a dysfunctional home for most of his life, bouncing between his mom's place, his grandmother's, and who knows where else. He didn't trust easily, and I couldn't blame him. When I looked at him, I saw a younger version of myself. A kid who had been let down, who had been forced to grow up too quickly. It broke my heart, and it made me even more determined to be the parent he needed. We had rough days in the beginning. Oliver would cry for hours sometimes, not because he missed Stacy, he barely even mentioned her, but because he didn't know how to process everything he had been through. He didn't know how to let go of the chaos he had come to expect. There were days when he wouldn't eat, days when he wouldn't talk, days when he would just sit quietly in his room, staring at the floor. It killed me to see him like that. But little by little, things began to change. I had one advantage that most single parents didn't: money. I had worked hard to build my business, and even after stepping away from it, I had enough passive income to keep us comfortable. I didn't need to work a 9-to-5 job. I didn't need to leave Oliver with a babysitter or in daycare. I could be there for him, all day, every day, and that made all the difference. I made him my top priority. I took him to therapy to help him work through his feelings, and I sat in the waiting room every session, ready to be there for him when he came out. I read parenting books, watched videos, did everything I could to understand what he needed. I made our home a safe, calm space where he could just be a kid. We had routines: breakfast together every morning, story time before bed, and everything in between filled with love and patience. Slowly but surely, I saw the light come back into Oliver's eyes. He started laughing again, smiling like he didn't have a care in the world. He loved playing with his toys, building castles out of blocks, and running around in the backyard with this unbridled joy that I hadn't seen in him before. Every time I saw him smile, it felt like a victory. One day, I remember watching him as he drew a picture at the kitchen table. It was simple, just a stick figure of him and me holding hands under a bright yellow sun. He brought it over to me with the biggest grin on his face and said, "Look, Dad, it's us." That was the first time he had ever called me Dad, without hesitation. I nearly broke down right there, but I held it together for his sake. Oliver thrived in the months and years that followed. He forgot the dysfunction he had grown up in. It was like Stacy's neglectful parenting was nothing more than a bad dream. In its place was a life filled with love, stability, and care. I taught him how to ride a bike, how to swim, how to tie his shoes. I was there for every scraped knee, every bedtime story, every tear and every triumph. In my eyes, he was the happiest kid in the world. And in a way, he saved me as much as I saved him. Seeing him grow, seeing him flourish, it healed something in me that I didn't even know was broken. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was truly part of a family that I had built with my own hands, one that no one could ever take away from me. Meeting Eliza wasn't something I expected. Honestly, I wasn't even looking for a relationship. My entire world revolved around Oliver, and I was fine with that. After everything we had been through, I didn't think I had room in my life, or my heart, for anyone else. But life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. I met her at a community event. It was a sunny Saturday, and I had taken Oliver to the park for a local fair. There were games, food stalls, and families everywhere. Oliver had been eyeing a small booth where kids could plant their own flowers in little pots to take home. He insisted we do it, so we waited in line. That's when I noticed her. Eliza was running the booth, smiling as she helped kids scoop dirt into tiny pots and press seeds into the soil. She had this warmth about her, this kindness that drew people in. Her laughter was soft, genuine, and it lit up the entire space. I don't know what it was, but something about her caught my attention. She wasn't flashy, she wasn't loud, but there was something special about the way she moved, the way she spoke to the kids like they were the most important people in the world. When it was our turn, she knelt down to Oliver's level and asked him what flower he wanted to plant. He picked sunflowers, and they chatted for a bit as she helped him with the pot. I was just standing there, watching, trying not to look too obvious. When she looked up and smiled at me, I realized I hadn't said a word the whole time. "You know," she said with a teasing grin, "you can plant one too. I won't judge." I laughed, probably a little too nervously, and told her that I'd leave the gardening to Oliver. We talked for a while after that, about the event, about kids, about how she had started volunteering at the park after moving to the area. She had this calming presence, this down-to-earth vibe that made it easy to talk to her. By the time we left, Oliver was holding his sunflower pot proudly, and I was holding Eliza's phone number. Our first few dates were simple: coffee, walks in the park, quiet dinners after Oliver went to bed. She was so different from anyone I'd ever been with. She wasn't trying to impress me, and she wasn't hiding who she was. She was honest, kind, and thoughtful. She cared about the little things, the things that most people overlooked. It didn't take long for her and Oliver to bond. She was patient with him, listened to him, and made him laugh in ways I hadn't seen in years. She wasn't trying to replace Stacy. She never even tried to step into that role. But Oliver started calling her his best friend. He would light up every time she came over, dragging her to his room to show her his latest drawings or asking her to play his favorite board games. Eventually, Eliza moved in with us. It just made sense. She fit into our lives so seamlessly, it felt like she had always been there. Oliver started calling her Mom one night during dinner. I wasn't expecting it, and I don't think Eliza was either. He had spilled his juice, and while I was grabbing a towel, she helped him clean up. He looked up at her and said, "Thanks, Mom." She froze, her eyes welling up with tears as she looked at me. I nodded, smiling at her, and she turned back to Oliver with the warmest smile I've ever seen. She hugged him tightly and said, "You're welcome, sweetheart." Later that night, when she was tucking him into bed, I overheard him tell her, "I love you. You're the best mom ever." I couldn't hold it together after that. I had to step away for a moment, overwhelmed by how far we'd come. Eliza was everything I could have ever asked for, and she had given Oliver something I thought he might never have again, a mother's love. It was around that time that Eliza shared something deeply personal with me. She told me that she couldn't have children of her own. She had known for years, and while she had made peace with it, there was still a part of her that ached for the family she thought she would never have. But to me, Eliza was a gift from God. She was everything I needed, and everything Oliver needed. She came into our lives when we were at our lowest, and she lifted us up in ways I didn't even know were possible. I told her that night, as we sat on the couch with Oliver's sunflower blooming on the windowsill, that she was our miracle. She wasn't just Oliver's mom, she was the love of my life. I kissed her forehead and told her, "You're not just a gift to me, Eliza. You're a gift to Oliver. You're the kind of mom I always dreamed of having when I was a kid. And now, he has you. We have you." She smiled, tears streaming down her cheeks, and whispered, "I love you, Hugh. Both of you." And just like that, I knew our family was complete. Life with Eliza felt like a second chance, not just for me, but for Oliver too. We'd been through so much already, but with her, everything started to feel lighter. She had this way of making every moment feel special, of reminding us that even the smallest things mattered. Whether it was cooking dinner together or playing board games in the living room, she made our house feel like a home. Oliver flourished in ways I hadn't thought possible. He was thriving at school, making friends, and always eager to come home to tell us about his day. Every night, Eliza helped him with his homework, sitting patiently at the kitchen table while he read aloud or solved math problems. She never rushed him, never lost her patience. It wasn't long before I started hearing him call her Mom all the time, without hesitation. One night, as I tucked him into bed, he looked up at me and said, "Dad, I think Mom is an angel." I laughed, ruffling his hair, but he was serious. "She's the best thing ever." I don't remember much from before, but I know I didn't feel this happy. His words stuck with me. He didn't just love Eliza, he trusted her, relied on her, and saw her as the safe, steady presence he had been missing for so long. For Eliza, becoming a mother was something she embraced with her whole heart. I saw her tear up once, after Oliver ran to her at a school event, waving his art project and yelling, "Mom, look." She held on to him like he was the most precious thing in the world. Later, she admitted to me how much that moment meant to her. "I never thought I'd hear someone call me Mom," she said softly. "It's like every prayer I didn't know I was saying got answered." We settled into a rhythm, the three of us. I had built my life in a way that let me stay home and be present for Oliver, and I wouldn't have changed that for anything. My passive income kept us comfortable, and while I stayed busy with small projects and investments, my main focus was my family. Eliza eventually found a job at a local nonprofit, helping foster kids find homes. It was something she felt deeply passionate about, and I couldn't have been prouder of her. But as happy as we were, I could tell there was something on Eliza's mind. She didn't say it outright, but I saw it in the way she lingered at work sometimes, or how she would watch Oliver playing with other kids at the park with a wistful smile. One evening, after we had put Oliver to bed, she finally opened up to me. "I've been thinking," she began, sitting across from me on the couch, her hands folded in her lap. About our family. About Oliver. She paused, searching for the right words. I feel so lucky to have him, to be his mom. But I've always wanted him to have more. A sibling, maybe. Someone who can share his world. Her words hit me in a way I hadn't expected. She wasn't just thinking about what she wanted. She was thinking about Oliver, about his future, about what would make him happiest. I know I can't have children, she continued, her voice trembling slightly. But I also know there are so many kids out there who need a family. Kids like Oliver was, kids like you were. And I think we could be that family for another child. I reached out and took her hands in mine. Eliza, I said, you've already given us so much. You've given Oliver a mom, and you've given me a reason to believe in love again. If this is what you want, if this is what you think is right for our family, then I'm with you. Always. Her eyes filled with tears, and she leaned forward, hugging me tightly. I love you, she whispered. From that moment on, we started exploring the idea of adoption. We talked to agencies, attended workshops, and began the long emotional process of finding a child who needed a home. It wasn't easy. There were interviews, background checks, and endless paperwork, but through it all, we stayed focused on what mattered most: building a loving, supportive family. For Oliver, the idea of a sibling was exciting. He couldn't stop asking questions about who they might be, how old they were, and when they'd come home. Seeing his enthusiasm only made us more determined. We wanted him to have the bond we both had missed growing up, the bond of knowing someone would always be there for him, no matter what. As the weeks turned into months, we grew closer as a family. Eliza was more than I ever could have dreamed of, strong, loving, and endlessly patient. And Oliver? He was thriving. He didn't just see me as his dad anymore. He saw us as a team, as a family. A real family. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. With Eliza by my side, and Oliver leading the way, we could face anything. Eliza and I had talked about marriage for months, but when the day finally came, it felt like something out of a dream. We kept things simple. Neither of us were the type for big, flashy events. Instead, we chose a small county chapel nestled in the rolling hills, surrounded by wildflowers and just enough room for the people who truly mattered. Oliver, of course, was at the center of it all. He was our ring bearer, grinning ear to ear as he walked down the aisle in a tiny suit we'd picked out together. Seeing him so happy, so full of life, made my heart swell. When the music started and Eliza walked in, wearing the most elegant yet understated white dress, I could barely breathe. Her smile said everything. This was our moment, our chance to start a new chapter. We exchanged vows that we wrote ourselves, promising to love, support, and cherish each other and the family we'd built. There wasn't a dry eye in the chapel when Eliza said, "Hugh, you gave me the family I never thought I'd have. You taught me how to love without fear, and you've shown me what it means to truly belong. I vow to always stand by you and our children, through every storm and every sunny day." The reception was held in the open air, under strings of fairy lights. We kept it small and intimate, with just enough space for Oliver to dance around with the other kids. The night was filled with laughter, heartfelt toasts, and moments I'll never forget. Watching Eliza dance with Oliver, her face lit up with joy, I couldn't help but think that life had finally given me the happy ending I'd been chasing for so long. A few days later, we were on a plane to the Maldives. It was Eliza's first time traveling somewhere so far away, and the excitement in her eyes made it all worth it. We spent our days lounging on white sand beaches, snorkeling in crystal-clear waters, and sharing quiet moments watching the sunsets. It was perfect in every way, a chance to celebrate not just our marriage, but the life we were building together. But even while we were on our honeymoon, we couldn't stop talking about what came next. Adoption had been on our minds for a long time, and we both felt ready to take the next step. We knew it wouldn't be easy, but we were committed. One evening, back home, Eliza came across a story that stopped her in her tracks. It was an ad from a local foster care agency, featuring a little girl named Lola. She was 3 years old, with wide brown eyes and a shy smile. The ad explained that she had been abandoned by her parents, who struggled with alcoholism, and that she was in need of a loving home. Eliza showed me the ad, her voice trembling as she read aloud. "Hugh, look at her. Look at those eyes. She deserves a chance. She deserves a family." I didn't need convincing. One look at Lola's picture, and I knew she was meant to be part of our lives. There was something in her expression that reminded me of Oliver when he first came to live with me. Cautious, unsure, but with a spark of hope buried deep inside. We reached out to the agency immediately. The process was long and thorough. Home visits, interviews, and endless paperwork. But every step brought us closer to bringing Lola home. We met her for the first time at a play center, where she clung to the social worker's hand, her eyes darting around nervously. Eliza knelt down and introduced herself gently, showing Lola a small stuffed bunny she had brought as a gift. At first, Lola didn't say much. She was shy, reserved, and unsure of what to make of us. But over the course of the visit, she started to warm up, especially to Eliza. By the end of the day, she was holding Eliza's hand, her little fingers gripping tightly as if she'd already decided this was where she belonged. When the day finally came to bring Lola home, Oliver was practically bouncing off the walls with excitement. He'd spent days preparing her room, carefully picking out toys and drawing pictures to hang on her walls. "She's going to love it here, Dad," he told me confidently. And he was right. Watching Eliza and Oliver welcome Lola into our family was one of the most beautiful moments of my life. She was hesitant at first, but Eliza had a way of making her feel safe. Over time, Lola began to trust us, her laughter filling the house in ways I hadn't realized were missing. For me, adopting Lola wasn't just about giving her a home, it was about giving her the love and stability I had always longed for as a child. She became a part of us, just as much as Oliver had, and our family felt whole in a way I couldn't describe. Eliza often said that finding Lola felt like fate, like she had been waiting for us all along. And maybe she was right, because when I looked at my family, at Eliza, Oliver, and Lola, I knew that everything I had been through, every struggle and heartbreak, had led me to this moment. Our family was everything I had dreamed of, and more. Lola and Oliver grew up surrounded by love, laughter, and stability, the kind of life I never thought I'd be able to give to anyone. Every day felt like a blessing, a chance to live out the life I had once only imagined. Oliver blossomed into a kind, thoughtful boy with a knack for making people laugh. He loved art and spent hours sketching everything from superheroes to animals. He had this quiet confidence about him, the kind that made me proud beyond words. He grew into a young man who looked out for his little sister, who was the kind of kid every parent hopes for. Lola, on the other hand, was pure energy. She was curious about everything and fearless in a way that only a child could be. She loved exploring the world, asking a million questions, and trying every new activity she could. But beneath all that adventurous spirit was a tenderness that reminded me of Eliza. As they grew older, I saw the bond between them deepen. They weren't just siblings, they were best friends. Oliver always made sure Lola felt included, and Lola looked up to him like he was her hero. Seeing them together, I knew that they were shaping each other in ways only siblings can. A few years after adopting Lola, I decided it was time for us to move to a new home. The old house had served us well, but I wanted a place that could grow with our family. I found a beautiful property just outside the city, a house with enough room for everyone to have their space, but cozy enough to still feel like home. There was a big backyard for the kids to play in, a bright kitchen where Eliza and I spent countless evenings cooking together, and a family room where we made memories that I would carry with me forever. Life was good. No, life was perfect. Better than I ever thought it could be. Eliza flourished in her work at the nonprofit, helping kids who needed it most. She often came home with stories that reminded me of how far we'd come, of the incredible journey we had been on. As for me, I had found my place. Being a father, a husband, and the anchor of our family gave me a sense of purpose I had never known before. I woke up every morning feeling grateful for the life we had built, for the love that filled our home. We honored each other in ways that made us better than we had ever been before. Oliver and Lola reminded me every day of what it meant to be resilient, to rise above the hardships of the past and embrace the beauty of the present. Eliza was my rock, the love of my life, the person who made all of this possible. Looking at my family, I felt nothing but gratitude. Gratitude for the second chances, for the love that healed old wounds, and for the life I had been given. I had once thought I would never belong, that I would always be the kid left behind. But now, I was a husband, a father, and the happiest man in the world. I had everything I could ever ask for, and I knew I would spend the rest of my life cherishing it.